Hello, and welcome, my friends, to a full introductory video to circular needles and knitting in the round, which is really amazing for beanies, of course, because we have round heads. But also, as you get on in your knitting journey, you can knit lots of things in the round, like jumpers and vests, and it just means there are no seams, which can look really slick. But today we're going to start at the very beginning. So voila, this is a circular needle. It's got a lovely bendy cord in the middle and kind of two sticks on the end. Hopefully by the stage time you're watching this video, you have learned to cast on. And hopefully if you are a newbie or if you are a beginner who's needing to brush up on your skills, maybe you haven't knitted in a while, I really encourage you to have done a thorough look at the basics playlist and even had a bit of a practice. So practice casting on, practice some knit stitches, maybe then undo it, practice casting on again, practice some purl stitches, and just really lay those foundations so that when you come to casting on for your project, you will in the end save time because you won't be making any mistakes. Well, mistakes are all part of the journey, but you will be making less mistakes. So yeah, go back and do that if you don't feel confident in really starting on the project at hand. But if you do feel confident, incredible, let's get going. So you'll have your cast on stitches here. So one thing to notice about when we cast on, it's got this beautiful braided edge. So when we're knitting in the round, the first number one thing we need to remember is we don't want to twist our braided edge or twist our cast on, because then we'll have kind of a funky look going on, or it would be also very confusing. So the first thing we are going to do, because as you can see, when we knit, we generally want some stitches on this needle and some stitches on this needle, or we're transferring, but at the moment we've got a bit of a gap. So we're going to rectify that through something called a magic loop. And really all that means is you go into the middle of your stitches, doesn't have to be exact, and you grab the cord and pull it through just so you can get the other side of your cast on up onto the other needles, and that often naturally does a little loop there, so that's why it's called a magic loop. So it really just takes some of that length out of the cord, which is necessary later on because your cast on stitches will stretch a bit. So don't be worried if you look at that and be like, my head is not that big, or my body is way bigger than that. These will loosen up as you go around, so this bit of slack is really good to have. Okay, so we've brought our stitches, some of our stitches, up onto the other needle, so now we've got a bit on both, and we want to have our cast on tail and the tail belonging to our ball of yarn on the right hand side. That's quite important. And remember, we're wanting to make sure there's no twists, so all our braided edge should be on the inside, and we're making a lovely circle already. Okie doke. So we're going to learn a technique called you're joining in the round, and we're going to do a bit of an invisible join today because it just looks really smart in the end product, and it's not that tricky. So in general, joining in the round means essentially going from what would be straight knitting, where you knit back and forth, which you can also do on circular needles, by the way, but we're concentrating on knitting in the round today. So we need to essentially join up these two ends so that it becomes this lovely circle of knitting that we can keep going round and around on. So we're going to do that, as I said, by a method called, well, it's just one invisible join method actually. Like many things in knitting, there are lots and lots of ways to do things, but this is a way I'm going to teach you today. Okay, so we've got our yarn attached to the ball in our right hand, and we twist it up to have a nice bit of tension, or however you like to hold some tension on your right, on that right hand, or on the ball, on the yarn attached to the ball. Cool. And we're going to go and grab this stitch off, and we're going to transfer it from our left needle to our right needle. So we're going to grab the edge stitch on the left needle and transfer it onto the right needle. So I'll do that again. We're just literally popping it from the left needle onto the right needle, like that. Okay, so it's still not attached in any way yet. So we popped one stitch from the left onto the right needle, and the way that we are going to attach it is we are going to cast off one stitch, and there's an allowance for that in the pattern. So there'll be you will have cast on one stitch extra than you will actually be using for your pattern. So don't fret about the fact that you're losing a stitch. It's all part of the plan. Cool. So we have transferred one stitch from the left needle to the right needle, and now we're going to take that left needle and we are going to hook it on the next stitch along. So not the stitch we transferred, the next stitch along. We're going to go in and we're going to hook it, and we're going to zhuzh everything down to the edge, because what we're actually wanting to do here is we're going to throw this guy off the needle. So we're going to take him up and over our edge stitch, because we do not want to throw that last stitch off, and then we're going to let it go to throw him off the needle. I'm going to reverse that to show you again, because my thumb was kind of in the way, excuse that. So just pulled him nice and tight. So bring him back out, pop him back on and over. Get some tension back on that. Okay, so there's my stitch from the left I put onto the right, he stays there. And now to join in the round in the way we're doing, we're going to grab this next guy. So we're going to hook him on like this. Oh, I haven't quite got him. There you go. So I'm going to hook the next guy. Don't worry about this tail, he's just hanging out at the moment. So I've hooked the next stitch along, and I'm going to bring him right to the edge so you can do it. Bring him up and over the edge stitch, keeping that last stitch on there, and throw him off. So he's not on any needles, and it looks a bit messy, but if you pull this, it will tighten it up nicely. And what we really need to remember is that this little guy might seem messy now, and these things might still seem a bit, kind of ungainly at the moment, but as you keep knitting the rounds, it really becomes quite seamless. So what we've done by casting that stitch off is we have joined this side with this last stitch. So as you can see now, if I move it, I move both, which was not the case before. So the first step was taking the stitch from this one to this one and doing a transfer, and then we took the next stitch along, lifted him up and over and off, and then the final step is we just pop that stitch back on the left needle from whence it came. So that is the 3 steps for joining in an invisible join in the round in this method. So the first step was transfer the stitch from left to right. The next step was take the next stitch along, bring him up and over and cast him off, kind of pull a bit of tension to tighten, and then take that stitch and pop him back on the left needle. So after step 2, you would have been looking a bit like this. And then step 3 is to transfer him back onto your left needle. Hopefully that has made sense up to now. Go and maybe have another little watch if you're still a bit confused, and maybe do it a few times to practice. And the one thing I will say is, if you get confused and have to kind of undo that last stitch, make sure you cast it back on so that you have the correct number of cast on stitches. Okay, so we've actually done our join now, so we can get our stitch marker. So this is the one you will have got with your kit, or if you've lost it or someone's come and play with it and not given it back, you can always just tie a bit of yarn in a circle and, and use that. But we're going to use the stitch marker for today. Okay, so get some nice tension, and essentially we just start knitting. So again, people get a bit concerned about this tail here. He just hangs out and he becomes less and less annoying as you go along. So I'm going to just do some knits. So we just knit into that first stitch as per normal. I'm going to knit around, knit every stitch, because that's the pattern that I'm just going to do to get around and show you one whole round. But remember, if you are doing any type of rib, so a 1x1 rib or a 2x2 rib, you really have to concentrate in this first round as to whether you're doing a knit with the yarn behind, or if you are going to do a purl, that the yarn comes to the front. So there's a whole video on rib stitch that I won't go into now, but it is just a huge consideration, especially on your first round, because you don't have any reference points to concentrate to make sure you're getting the right pattern. But right now I'm just going to knit. So I'm going to knit every stitch just like normal. So knitting in the round is just like normal knitting, in that you put your needle in, strangle, reel them in, throw them off the cliff. So the one thing that you will get to is, remember that magic loop from the beginning? I'm kind of coming up to him, or see, it's all getting a bit tangled here. So you can manipulate the stitches and the cord to kind of, you get into a bit of a rhythm of moving this loop around. So I usually wait till about 5 stitches before the loop, before I transfer the loop somewhere else, and I'll show you how I do that. So we just keep knitting in the round, and part of the trick of knitting in the round, I think, is really just managing your kind of tension and zhuzhing your stitches around as you go, kind of methodically doing it in a circular way to just make sure the stitches come nicely up onto the needle so that you can knit into them, and then you kind of give a little squidge of those ones around so they don't get bunched up. And then, like I said, you will get to your magic loop at some point, and maybe about this far away from it, you just go around the circle, grab the cord and pull it through so that you're not close to it anymore. So then you can happily keep on knitting. So I'll try and go fast so you guys don't have to sit here and watch me knit all day, because I just want to get round one round to show you what it's like when we've done a full circle. And that would, you know that by the fact that you'll get to your stitch marker again. So here there's a bit of a bunch, so I just give it a nice little massage out so that it's all even and not causing me grief by being a bit like a car jam over there. So we just want to, here's my ball of yarn, going knitting in the round, knit, knit, knit. And sometimes these cast on stitches can be a bit tight, so if you have to really jam your needle in there, that is a-okay. They loosen up as you go around. Okay, so I've kind of got close to my magic round, see? Magic roundy round. So I'm just going to keep going, and you can go past your beginning if you get to about here. You pull in, and see there's a bit of a twist. You can always just twist that needle to get that kink out. So yeah, you just, it becomes quite rhythmic, doing some stitches, moving the magic round, doing some stitches, moving the magic round, and massaging the stitches so they don't get too bunched up. It takes practice, but it becomes quite natural and quite rhythmic, I do have to say. Okay, so we're coming up to our stitch marker, which means we're coming up to our first, having done one whole round. So these are just knit stitches, knit, knit, knit. But remember, there are patterns that have a rib stitch to begin with. So if that is your pattern, go and practice the rib stitch, because it can get you out. Okay, so I'm coming up to my stitch marker. I'll just pull this round so we can do this nice and cleanly. Got a twist in it. Okay, and of course you'll notice your tail is there as well. So that is a dead giveaway that you're also coming up to the finishing around. So here we are, this is the last stitch, and it does look a bit baggy still, but like I said, as you keep going, this will really even out, and it will be quite tricky to see where you've even joined. Okay, so once you've got to your stitch marker, what I wanted to show you is pretty simple really, is that you just take it off the left needle, pop it on the right needle, and tick in your pattern book that you've done one round, or in your mind, or anywhere that you're keeping track, and then you just keep going. And you just keep doing whatever pattern you're doing, whether it's a knit stitch like me, or a rib stitch, which is knit 1 purl 1, or a 2x2 rib, which is a knit 2 purl 2. And you just keep going around, and your join just gets less and less. See, already you can hardly tell. And then at the end you will weave this in, which is in its own video on how to weave in your ends. And you can see how braided edge is still all pointing inwards, so there's no twist. And essentially you go forth and you keep going until the required numbers of rounds are done, and then you'll start doing the decrease for the noggin, which is another video, and voila, you will have made your very first beanie in this case. Or, you know, if you're doing any other knitting in the round, Godspeed. Yeah, it's a really cool skill to learn, and it's not that tricky once you get the hang of it. Any questions, let me know. If you need to go back and watch the joining in the round bit, please do that and have a practice. And yeah, good luck. I can't wait to see your finished creations.